So you and I agree also on other things, including the fact, Ross, that people always overreact to week one. As an example, the Steelers beat the Bills in week one. The Packers got destroyed in week one. So how different do the Steelers and the Bills and the Packers look now?
Yeah, I've come to the conclusion over the years that, and maybe we should have already known this, or maybe people already know this, but week one really tells us the least of any week the entire season. There's so many different factors that go into it. Teams have new coordinators, new schemes. You don't really know what it is they're going to do. I mean, even we'll see what the Eagles are like tonight, but the Eagles killed the Falcons. They both had new head coaches, but the two people calling the plays for the Eagles on both sides of the ball had never done it before. So there's simply no track record. So you learn a lot more in week two and week three than you do in week one. And I think, man, the Steelers are a great example of that. And I tweeted this yesterday, Jim. Can you believe the Steelers beat the Bills? I mean, like watching both those teams play the last 2 weeks, the Bills are destroying the Dolphins and Washington football team, who aren't terrible teams, by the way, and the Bills just annihilated them. And the Steelers look like the bad news bears out there the last couple of weeks against the Raiders and the Bengals. It's hard to believe it was 2 weeks ago that the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Buffalo Bills.
I mean, these are all great points. I would agree with that last statement. And also, I think I said it myself on the NFL on CBS. I said, look, the Raiders are different. Their 2-0 this year is different, in part because they beat the Ravens and the Steelers. But then, obviously, that win over the Steelers does not look so great right about now. Ross Tucker is joining us. Ross, were you at all surprised that Aaron Rodgers got his team in field goal range with less than 40 seconds left on the clock and no timeouts?
No, I wasn't surprised. You'd still think, given the Packers' O-line situation, that perhaps the Niners would have prevented that. It's interesting because my Even Money podcast co-host, Steve Fezzik, he's furious about that because, the Niners kicked it all the way into the end zone. And he made this point the other day. I can't remember who was playing, but he made this point the other day. In those situations, you really should do, Jim, one of those high mortar-type kicks that comes down inside the 5. You're going to run 7, 8, 9 seconds off the clock, and they're still going to end up only getting the ball at about the 25. Everybody in these late-game situations that kicks off I think it might have been the Ravens that did it, but that kicks it all the way into the end zone for a touchback, you're really doing the other side a favor. There's a lot of things like that I think the analytics folks are starting to realize, but they haven't caught up to that one yet, because then you just give the Packers all the time. You take no time off the clock on the kickoff, so they get it to 25, and what was it, 2 throws from Rodgers to Devontae Adams? Boom, they're in Mason Crosby range?
It's actually a very good point. It's a really good point. Those 7 or 8 seconds mean all the difference in the world to a guy like Aaron Rodgers. I thought, Ross, also you had a great tweet last night during the game, and you said, quote, Bosa is incredible, end of quote. As an offensive lineman, Ross, what do you think when you watch Nick Bosa?
Yeah, I think he's the best. I really do. Because, if you watch him play in and play out, a lot of times the pass rushers, they're not great against the run, or they don't really play both. I mean, even just like the first 3 or 4 plays of the game last night, he knocked the first drive, he knocked the ball down, then he beat the tackle on an inside move and forced a face mask penalty, which made him kick a field goal. Then he bench pressed the offensive tackle back and made a tackle for loss against the run. He's so strong in his lower body. He's so good with his hands. He's just a really, really impressive young player. I'm consistently amazed with how technically skilled the Bosas are and have been from such a young age. I don't know who worked with them growing up and in high school, maybe their dad, with their hands, but they're just so technically sound. It's really fun to watch both those guys play.
I think they're amazing. I think they're all that, and I think the mindset's incredible. I can't get enough of those guys, both of them. Ross, what about Justin Fields? Like, he finally makes his start in the regular season, and it went pretty horribly, like even more horribly than anybody could have predicted. 9 sacks, a single yard passing, 1 net yard passing. How much of this is on him? How much of this is on the head coach? And what was going through your mind as you watched him take that beating?
I honestly think, and I said this today on my podcast, Jim, I think I'm the only person that will say this out loud. This is why Justin Fields wasn't starting. This is why Andy Dalton was the starter. And it's not to say that Fields is bad, but look, their offensive line, Jim, is terrible.
It's the worst.
So I don't think they wanted to put a rookie quarterback, not running quarterback, a rookie quarterback out there with a terrible offensive line. The last thing they wanted to do was affect Fields' confidence. And I got to be honest with you, I highly doubt he woke up feeling very confident this morning, Jim. They did not want to put him behind that line this early. Now, I will say this, he didn't look like a guy that was totally ready. And anytime there's 9 sacks, a decent amount of those are on the quarterback, right? I mean, there would never be 9 sacks for the Bradys, the Peyton Mannings, the guys that get the ball out quickly. So part of those are on Justin. And maybe, Jim, maybe Matt Nagy knows that he doesn't want to change the whole offense, or he's not good enough to change the whole offense in 1 week to suit what Fields does best. Maybe it's all those things. And that's okay. It's okay to say, you know what, we don't want to start him yet because he's not ready. Our O-line's not ready. We don't want to rattle him or his confidence by putting him out there before the O-line or he are ready. And, we're not ready to change everything we do to just run RPOs all the time to try to put him in a better situation. So that's literally, it's amazing to me that not one person has said publicly, you know what, maybe that's why they weren't starting him yet. Maybe they realized it wasn't a good idea for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, all of those reasons, and maybe deep down, Nagy knows he doesn't have what it takes or know what he can do to help his young quarterback, because I didn't see any help for him at all. But very clearly that was the fear, right? We put this guy out there and this is what happens. And as confident as he is and as great a college career as he has, I agree with you, Ross. There's no way that guy rolled out of bed this morning feeling really good about things and about himself. Now let me ask you this. What about Kansas City? Ross, they're coming off a loss to the Chargers. At home, they've lost 2 in a row. Granted, a couple of close games, tight games. But how does Kansas City look to you 3 games in?
Well, the thing is interesting, and I know you follow this stuff. They were 8-0 in one-score games last year.
Right.
They had a crazy streak of winning one-score games. I remember watching them play, and every game they'd get a lead, and then the other team would come from behind, and then late, Patrick Mahomes would make the one clinching play to win, right? He'd make the throw, or he'd run for 8 yards, or whatever. And I just never thought, as great as he is, and he is, I just didn't think that was sustainable. Now, I'm not getting too worked up yet, and I'll tell you why. In week 2 against Baltimore, I was there calling the game for West of 1. If they just take a knee and Edwards-Helaire doesn't fumble, they kick that field goal and win the game. So they're 2-0. And then yesterday, their first 3 times they had the ball, they got into Chargers territory, into the red area, and turned it over. Now, one of them was Mahomes with a no-look pass that he threw a little bit behind the guy. And I know you're not allowed to publicly criticize Mahomes ever, but it's partially his fault. It wasn't perfect placement, and I don't think the guy was ready because it was a no-look pass, and that was a pick. And then Edwards-Helaire fumbled again. So I still think they're one of the best teams, but it is kind of wild to look at their division, and the Raiders and Broncos both already have 2 games on them. The good news for the Chiefs is they get to play both those teams twice.
That actually is really strange. 3 weeks in. Ross, one more thought. Earlier this month, you had a tweet. I think this is a great tweet. Daniel Jones is fast, smart, tough, accurate, strong arm, hardworking, high character, yet I still don't know if he's, quote, good. I agree with all of that. How do you explain that, though?
You know what it is? Because I was thinking about this, and Wentz is all of those things as well. And ultimately, even though, look, they're both like documented smart guys. Like if you ever went in there and went on the whiteboard, they could show you everything. They know everything. The longer I do this, the more I realize there's two things. There's an innate feel for the position, which is like pocket presence, pocket movement. And then there is processing information in a short period of time for decision making. And both those guys struggle there. Jones hasn't. Here's what's crazy. If you're a Giants fan, he played maybe his best game ever against Washington. They lost. He didn't turn it over yesterday. They lost. But he just doesn't. Those guys, even though they check all those boxes, the most important boxes to check, really the most important box to check in the NFL, is decision making. And neither one of those guys consistently makes the right decision in a short amount of time. And that's it. That's the position more than anything else, is that one quality. Wentz still hasn't learned. You watch Wentz, he still puts himself in reckless positions. And I think the Colts are in a bad spot with him because being reckless and injury-riddled, prone, whatever you want to call it, that's just a bad combo. It's not a sustainable combo. But that's the one box, I guess, when I wrote down all those other things, all those check marks, that neither guy does. Neither one of those guys has a great natural feel and or makes the right decision a high.
Hey, Ross, I'm going to give you a great decision. My decision to bring you back in. Great decision by me. Ross, you are the best.